Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Building Subtext. This week, I want to go over a brand new feature, something that I'm very excited about, something that I've wanted to do for a very, very, very long time. So what I'm going to show you though is a prototype of it. It doesn't look as pretty as I would like it to look. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles. Plus, it's a little slow because it's in a test phase of it. If you're a subscriber to Subtext and you've checked out the story forming videos and you looked at the one for Nomadland, you know that halfway through my analysis of it, I stopped because the signpost order wasn't right. It just didn't feel like what it should be. Signpost 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the main character through line just didn't feel right. And I wasn't sure if that was because of the focus that I had chosen for her or because of the direction that I had chosen for her, which one is which. And I played with both, and even both of them didn't quite work, but I knew that the rest of the story form was correct. I just intuitively knew that it was right. But what I was seeing reflected in the plot progression of Signpost didn't match the meaning of the story. And that propelled me to do the final phase of creating the subtext narrative engine. And I'm able to create my own plot progressions based on the meaning of what is in the premise. It works amazing. And the ability to actually see your story all the way down to the scene resolution is incredible. And so I'm going to show you a couple examples from films that most of you know and show you what it's like. And this is my account here in subtext. And if I come down here to, what was the first one I checked out was, I believe it was Back to the Future. And I will look at the influence character through line. This is George. This is Marty's father. And if you come into the third signpost, and the end of this signpost is when he punches out Biff. So this is that moment in the story in between the third signpost and the fourth signpost, what most people consider the break between Act 2 and Act 3. This is that moment. And his influence on Marty and on the rest of the cast is this conflict of subconscious, which is an area of the mind that deals with basic drives and desires. It's essentially him getting angry. So you can see it just popped up right there at the top. So being angry there, that would be one way to illustrate his signpost 3 of subconscious. But with subtext, you can actually break down that signpost and find out what happens within subconscious. Now, it's enough in a story just to have a single sentence that has him have some kind of reflection of the subconscious, and that's how he impacts Marty to grow. That's what the influence character is supposed to do. What you can do in subtext is actually break down subconscious to see what happens within that signpost. So if I open up here, you'll see it says closure, hope, dream, and denial. Those are the 4 steps that go into breaking down the subconscious for George. He would go through closure, then there'd be some sort of hope, some sort of dream, and then eventually some issue of denial, some rejection of a previously held sort of belief that would then get him to the place where he's able to punch out George. So this would be just breaking down subconscious, but then what you can also do is break down each one of these and see what's supposed to happen within each one of these variations in each one of these sequences. So signposts are the acts. These variations, those are closer to the sequences. It's not perfect, but it's close. And then underneath that is the actual individual scene. So what would that look like? So if I open this up, you have inaction to evaluation to reevaluation, and then ultimately protection. So this is subtext predicting, hey, if you're going to write this story, this is what the influence character should go through. They should perhaps be in a place of inaction that creates a lot of potential. Then there's some evaluation that is some sort of resistance. In other words, maybe I shouldn't do anything, or Biff telling him, get out of here. And then there's a lot of reevaluation that's going on, which is Lorraine begging him to help or do something. And then finally, protection when he gets angry enough to knock Biff out. And you'll see I've also applied the different labels that go on each scene. There's an article I wrote a couple years ago called Writing Perfect Scene Structure, which talks about how each one of these elements is made up of 3 different modalities of scene structure. The first 4 are closest to the essential qualities of a narrative. So knowledge, thought, ability, and desire, which in storytelling transfer to a situation, some activities, a manipulation, and then a fixed attitude. Typically, I just have writers choose, as long as you attach one of these to one of these other ones, then you're fine. It doesn't really matter which one. But what I've done now with subtext is I've actually told you, well, this is actually what it should be. The second thing it does is figure out the potential, resistance, current, and outcome. And this is the dramatic circuit of the narrative. So potential is where all the motivation for something to go wrong. There's some resistance that comes in, and when combined with the potential, then magnifies into this current, then you run through the dramatic circuit, and then you get the outcome, which just creates potential for the next scene. And then, of course, you have the temporal element of it, which is one, two, three, and four. And for the most part, these are always going to be in order. It's not necessarily story weaving, which are all the cool things where you can do flash forwards and flashback and all that stuff. But this is how the order that the mind is working through the narrative, through all these different processes, through all these different narrative methods. And I just found this to be absolutely incredible that the first test, this is the first example of what this would look like, how prescient it is in describing exactly what happens in the story. Another one I thought that was really illustrative of how great this is would be the classic Star Wars example, which is here. Again, the influence character here, if I come into Obi-Wan Kenobi. And the second signpost is when they're on the Falcon and they're headed to Alderaan, and he does the whole test where he's got the helmet on, and then it's like I can't see anything with the blast shield down. And he blanks out all that stuff, and then he's just supposed to feel the Force, and that's coming from Obi-Wan Kenobi. The signpost there is about the preconscious, essentially getting rid of your instincts, your impulses, like you see something and then you react to it. Get rid of that and instead just kind of flow with it and just feel it. If you open this up, you get instinct, you get senses, which I thought was absolutely incredible, interpretation, and conditioning. Now, this might happen in a single scene, and it may or may not have all four. If you're writing a novel, this might be stretched out and it might go through all of these, over a period of time. Or it could just be one, you could just grab one. For Star Wars here, there's some interpretation, there's some training that's going on. But the thing that got me really excited was the senses, because it's the thinking the potential of, well, I can't do anything if I can't see it, right? That's the potential. And then that creates a lot of angst or motivation because, well, now you're just basing it on reality, on what you can actually see. And the typical thing is to just go with it. Just, don't do anything. Don't try and react the way that you usually would react, and instead change the way you do it. Adapt to what it is happening. When you have the helmet on, when you can't actually see, how are you going to adapt to it? And just kind of flow with it. And then that changes your perception where he's like, I actually could see it. Right. So again, this is a predictive example of exactly what subtext can do and help you figure out your scenes and where they're going. And then finally, the last example I wanted to show was the Matrix, which I believe is right here. This one was crazy. I didn't even realize this. So earlier in the year, I had this whole thing about the holistic temporal order of things where I was changing the typical Z pattern through a quad and thinking of it more holistically. I still think that can work, but I think there's value in keeping the Z pattern as you look at the structure. If I come into the story form here and I look at Neo here at the end, this is when he heads back to the end, right? When he goes back to the hotel that they were at the beginning. And if you come down here and you open this up, so the past is going to be explored in terms of value, in terms of confidence, right? He's got a little bit of confidence going on there. Anxiety that's happening when his confidence is able to create worry in the other agents. And then finally, something that's of importance to him. And it becomes a very personal thing at the end of that. And if you open this up, you get expectation, ending, unending, and determination, which is incredible because that's essentially his last final speech when he's on the phone. I don't know what to expect, but I'm going to end you. It's going to keep going on. And basically, the decision I live up to you, and that's determination. Now, this one is the Z pattern. It's very typical to that. If we go into the thematic movements here, and I think, where is it? I guess here, this would probably be a good example of it. In that holistic temporal thing, this used to be closure and dream. I had flipped these two, but I think it makes more sense if you think about his visit to the Oracle and then his whole speech about, Morpheus had this dream, but it's like it's not real. Like he's just completely making it up, and now I'm just gonna finish things off, and then that's where he's headed to. So there's a lot of films when I was going through and changing these all to the new plot progressions that it just made more sense to have it in structurally as you're looking at it. It's probably important to keep that Z pattern because that's what everything else is based on. What I was trying to get at and what I was intuitively feeling needed to be there, I actually got with this arrangement of plot progressions. All that stuff that I was going for these first couple of months of 2021, I actually got once I was able to finally get it down to the resolution of the scene level. So that's it for this week. Well, I'm going to spend the rest of April going through and taking all 475 story forms, plugging them into this engine, getting the whole plot progression, and making sure when you go to narrative first and you read an article, it actually has the right plot progression. It's not broken and telling you something that's different, and just bring it all into one cohesive unit to help you write a better story. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.